You may have heard of a man named St. Thomas Aquinas. Well, in one of his larger works called Summa Theologiae, he explains 5 ways one could support the idea of an ultimate reality, or essentially for a God. This is going to be the last video that sort of sums up, I think, everything from before. And these ways are also extremely in-depth, so I highly encourage you all to go out, do your own research on them, because I can't get to all the points in this very short video. So the first way, the argument from motion. It is clear to us that in our world, things are in motion. We can see it whenever we watch a car passes by. We can smell it while the kitchen begins to emanate with sugar as cookies bake. We can hear it in a Hans Zimmer soundtrack, taste it when we eat something that has a weird aftertaste, feel it as our palms become sweaty during a presentation. My point is that this way is palpable. It's observable, it's undeniable. The fact that things in life are in motion. And this motion or change is just called moving from a place of potentiality to actuality. So for example, a piece of wood has the potential to be hot. A piece of wood within itself is not hot. You wouldn't say that something is not wood just because it's cold, because wood can be cold. Fire is hot though, and it's part of fire's nature to be hot. Therefore, if fire is hot, then fire is in actuality hot, while wood could be hot, meaning that it only is in potentiality hot. How does something become actual from potential? Well, we take something that's actual, the fire, take something that's potential, the wood goes into the fire, and the actual hot, which is the fire, heats up the wood, and now that wood that's in the fire becomes actual hot. And now since the wood is actually hot, my hand, which has the potentiality to be hot, if I touch my hand to that wood, that piece of wood, it's now going to make my hand hot, making my hand actually hot, and then so forth. The argument then follows as such that there must be something that has pure actuality and doesn't have any potential. Because if it were to have potential, then it would therefore rely on a cause or an actuality before it to become that actuality. So you see why this is problematic. Newton's first law says, an object at rest stays at rest. So something must be the first to cause motion in order for anything to be in motion at all. So why does there have to be a start? Well, think about a long line of boxcars on train tracks. Each boxcar is pulling the one in front of it, causing it to move. Now think about an infinite trail of boxcars in that scenario. I mean, you could have two outcomes. You could have, sure, an infinite long boxcar train that's moving, or you could have an infinite long link of boxcars that are just stationary, that are not moving. Because an infinite number does not imply nor necessitate a movement of the boxcars. They could just be still. Now, what needs to happen for them all to start moving? You need an unmoved mover, a first mover, which is the locomotive. The second way is sort of similar. It is different though. The logic is that nothing can be the efficient cause of itself. Because in order for something to have caused itself, then that thing would have to exist prior to the thing existing, which makes no sense. For example, why does this watch exist? Well, this watch exists because the watchmaker made the watch. Why does the watchmaker exist? Because the watchmaker's parents, had sex and conceived of him, and his mom bore him, and he existed. And you can keep going back and back and back. It would be weird to say that this watch caused itself, because in order for that to happen, the watch would have to be in existence before the watch exists, so the watch can cause the existence, which, as you can see, doesn't make sense. This kind of follows my logic in the Big Bang cosmology video that I posted a little whiles back. If the universe had a beginning, then something had to have been the efficient cause, the first cause of the universe, because the universe can't cause itself. The third way observes that some things begin to exist and some things cease to exist. We can conclude that these things are able to exist and not able to exist, and thus labeled as possible beings because they have the possibility of not existing. I at some point did not exist, and thus I'm a possible being. But if everything was a possible being, then there would be a time where nothing existed. That brings up the issue that if nothing existed, then there'd be nothing to put into motion. There'd be nothing to cause the first cause. So there has to be at least one necessary being, an infinite being that has no beginning, because if it has a beginning, then it would need a cause or a motion starter, and it also would be a possible being, not necessary. The fourth way is the argument from degrees of being. So if something is hot, such as the wood in the fire earlier, it is being labeled as such because it is being compared to something which is hottest, which Aquinas attributed the hottest thing being fire, but obviously now we know that's not true. There are hotter things such as like a core of a star or the collision of two neutron stars, etc. But nonetheless, you understand the premise. If we were able to label things like good, true, just, loving, there must be that which is utterly most good, true, just, and loving to base that scale off of. You could argue, well, there might always be something that's hotter that we just haven't discovered. There might be something that's just truer that we haven't discovered. Take for this example, you're in a room, there's 10 people in the room. Could you tell me who's the tallest person there? Yes, you could. Of course. I mean, that doesn't prove a maximum of tallness, but within the observable space you're in, you have observed the people and have based everyone's tallness still off of the tallest person in the room. Doesn't matter if that person is the tallest in the world, but you're still basing your scale of tallness off of the tallest thing. And then the final way is that things that lack intelligence cannot move towards an end, but they have to be directed or endowed with knowledge and intelligence to do so. The example Aquinas gives is an arrow that flies towards a bullseye. The arrow lacks intelligence and can't, thus, hit the bullseye by itself. So it needs something with intelligence to put it into the quiver, to aim and fire it at the bullseye in order for the arrow to do this. This sort of relates to the fine-tuning argument that I spoke about in a past video, such that an electron doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have intelligence to choose where to go. An electron attracts protons. That's just what an electron does. It doesn't choose to do that, it just does it. But imagine a universe where electrons didn't have that attraction to a proton. I mean, life wouldn't exist. I mean, we can see this in nucleic forces. If that wasn't just naturally how it was, life wouldn't exist. Gravitational forces, the flatness of the universe. There's a lot of things in the fine-tuning argument that doesn't have an intellect to choose to go towards the good or to go towards life existing, and yet they still do. So now what? Well, this was obviously a very summarized video, and I encourage you to go out and do your own research on the 5 ways. A great resource is a book written by Matt Fradd and Robert Delfino called Does God Exist? And also the Thomistic Institute has a great playlist on YouTube on explaining these in great depth. Anyway, happy learning and God bless everyone.